Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this episode is taken from the 12th and final session of the Keeping the Dream Alive series of webinars, which we're collaborating on with the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage and My Travel Research. This episode is entitled Facts Not Fear, a real-time insight into the current travel trends. And we were delighted to have Olivier Ponti, who is the Vice President of Global Insights at Low Season Traveller's big data partners, ForwardKeys, to help guide us through this fascinating session. This is the Keynote. Enjoy. We've got Olivier Ponti with us today, who is the leader of the ForwardKeys Insights team. Olivier is one of the world's most authoritative experts in travel research and destination marketing. He gives dozens, probably more than dozens, of conference presentations and media interviews every year, cross-referencing ForwardKeys' considerable data with numerous other sources to identify new travel trends, forecast future travel patterns, reveal the impact of events on travel, and provide deep insights into the travelers of tomorrow. Previously, Olivier was research manager at Amsterdam Marketing, where he helped attract tourism and business investment to the city by extensive use of market research and, of course, compelling presentations. Latterly, as Amsterdam became increasingly popular, his data-driven approach was at the heart of successful initiatives to balance the demands of visitors, residents, and businesses. Very much linked to what we were talking about on Tuesday, actually. Olivier Ponti's career in city tourism started in 2004, where he was appointed manager of the tourism research department of the Paris Visitors and Convention Bureau. Olivier was educated at Sciences Po in Paris, where he gained a master's degree in economics, and at the Sorbonne University, where he gained a master's degree in tourism development. His connection to academia continues as he teaches market intelligence at the Sorbonne still. So a very good morning to you, Olivier. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and welcome to the Tourism Expert Recovery Series. How are you? Join me up on stage.
Good morning, Jed. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been following what you guys have been doing in the past weeks with this series of webinars, listening to the podcast while I was doing some sport in the morning, and I'm really honored to be here with you today and be the last of the presenters. So thank you very much for this. Just make sure that you can all see my screen. Look, Jed, when we first talked about this presentation a few weeks ago, and we discussed the title, this title, Facts Not Fear, seemed quite appropriate. A lot of tourism businesses were in panic mode. And we thought that it would be really interesting for everybody to put some facts on the table. It turns out that since we had this discussion, the situation has evolved quite significantly worldwide. We're seeing a number of destinations reopening. We're all looking at what's happening in China, on the domestic Chinese market, and this gives a lot of people in the industry hope, and sometimes wild hopes. So I think we could have also entitled these presentations "Facts Not Fear Nor Wild Optimism," and this is what I'm going to show during this presentation. We see that there are some things changing on the market at the moment, but this should lead us to very cautious optimism. So without further ado, let's have a look at the facts. Although I believe it's important before we start talking about the facts to say a few words about where the data comes from. I work for ForwardKeys. We're a travel analytics company. We're based in Valencia, Spain, and what we do is use different big data sets to monitor trends on the air travel, on air travel. We do this looking at the different steps of the traveler's journey. From the moment people start searching flight on meta search engines like Skyscanner, to the moment that airlines put capacity on the market. So tell the consumer, hey, we've got some planes flying from point A to B. It's that kind of planes. It's that many seats, and this is really important for understanding the market. This close look at the offer. So that's something we monitor with the help of Cerium. We keep a close watch on events and make sure that we can link events to booking behavior. Booking and ticketing are two of our key data sets. We work very closely with GDSs, with more than 100 airlines, to get a good understanding of what's happening on the booking and ticketing front. That gives us probably the most comprehensive data set on the matter in the world. And then we use this information to build extra layers of intelligence on top of these foundations. So these are the key data sets that I will be using for this presentation. I've selected 5 facts that I consider as key learnings of the current crisis. And the first fact is that straight lines don't last forever. For years now, we've grown accustomed to seeing charts projecting a never-ending growth. That growth could take the shape of air passengers, of tourist arrivals, hotel rooms, Airbnbs, other forms of accommodation. We've grown accustomed to seeing those numbers just grow, basically, from one year to the others. And in that context, it was reasonable to assume, based on what we knew that back then, that this growth would continue. I mean, there's never been as many people able and willing to travel. It's never been cheaper for people to travel, especially by air. And honestly, when looking at those straight lines showing the growth in number of air passengers, it's nearly impossible not to imagine that straight line continuing in the future. All of these were reasonable assumptions until not long ago, and yet now I believe that we know better. We switched in a matter of months from over tourism to no tourism. What you can see on this slide is the number of international arrivals, air arrivals by world region for the month of May. And it doesn't, make any difference where you're looking at on this map. The results are pretty much the same everywhere. We're looking at a massive decrease of air arrivals, minus 97% worldwide, and this is really affecting all regions. So what this means is that the travel sector has entered into coma, and what we're all hoping is that it will get out of it as soon as possible. So no arrivals in the past month, and what's even more worrying is that there were no bookings either. So this chart shows on a weekly basis the number of bookings that have been made for a trip anytime in the future, and it looks at the various key source markets: Asia Pacific, Europe, the Americas, Africa, and the Middle East. As you can see, since the beginning of March, we are in this unprecedented situation. when there are more cancellations than bookings for all key source markets. So if people do not book now, if they haven't booked in the past weeks, it's very unlikely that we are going to see them in our destinations in the coming month. And this is why the summer outlook looks so bleak. Total arrivals, international arrivals worldwide are 83% behind their 2019 levels. All key destinations are affected in similar ways. So basically what we have now are bookings that were made a long time ago and that could very easily vanish as we get closer to the departure date. This situation has a lot to do with the fact that in a very, very short period of time, the world basically shut down. And we saw travel restrictions being put in place everywhere around the world, and that makes the reopening of those destinations a prerequisite to any recovery scenario. We cannot have reopening, we cannot have recovery without a lifting of travel restrictions. This is the state of travel restrictions worldwide at the end of last week. And as you can see, there's not a single country in the world without a form of travel restriction. Obviously, if your business depends on international travel, you cannot survive for long in a world like that. Now, fortunately for the travel sector, the situation is evolving at a fast pace. We're seeing travel bubbles being put in place. Thinking of the Baltic states, for example, or between Norway and Denmark. I know there's been a lot of talks about a trans-Tasman travel bubble, but it hasn't materialized yet. This is a way for destinations to reignite international travel, but as we can see, it's quite cumbersome. At least it's not easy to put in place. We're also seeing a lot of bilateral agreements being signed to facilitate business travel. Very recently, so one being signed between China and Singapore. Before there was one between China and South Korea. For example, so that's another modality of the reopening. But most importantly, some destinations are communicating on a reopening of the market, saying that they are open for business again, whether it's just for domestic tourism or for international tourism as well. This week, as we speak, we've got destinations like St. Lucia in the Caribbean, Austria, or Italy in Europe, communicating on a gradual reopening. But when you start looking at the details of these reopenings, you realize that these destinations remain closed to some, if not most, of the countries. Austria is reopening, yes, that's true, but not for Italians, for example. Or St. Lucia is reopening, but just for travelers from the US. So I believe there is still a long way to go if we want to go back to the pre-crisis situation. Now, the next fact has to do with air capacity, which has reached rock bottom. We know just how important air travel is for international tourism. And for air travel to be able to function properly, we need planes. What you can see on this chart is that international capacity is just a fraction of what it used to be, less than 10% compared to 2019 levels. We know that airlines are fighting for survival. They're selling part of their fleet, they're firing their staff, they're seeking government bailouts. It is not clear at this stage how many airlines will make it in the end, but it is clear that air connectivity has received a very serious blow, and that it will not recover overnight. Now let's have a look at some of the positive signs of the current situation. Contrary to previous crises, I believe we are now better equipped to identify early signs of recovery and leverage them. Think of SARS, think of 9/11, think of the last financial crisis. At the time, we did not have all the data that we currently have at hand, to understand what was going on, to identify opportunities, and to make sure that we could act on these insights. Luckily, we're a bit further down the road of digital transformation and then big data. So the situation is significantly different. And when trying to identify early signs of recovery now, we see that there are indeed some, but that they need a very careful analysis so that we understand what recovery truly means and how to interpret those pictures we see in the news, for example, of visitors being back in key tourist attractions such as Chinese tourist attractions, for example. Let's focus on China first, because this is probably the country that's been most in the news when it comes to recovery. That's where people are putting their hope, and this is a fascinating country because it's been the hardest hit in the early stage of the crisis, but it looks like it's also the first country to progressively get out of the crisis. So what can we learn from this case? Well, we've all seen it. Pictures of attractions, popular attractions being completely empty, and then pictures of those attractions welcoming a number of tourists again. So what's behind this? Who are these tourists? What's behind those figures that we hear as well from the industry regarding the rise of occupancy rate in hotels, etc., etc. Now, we looked at the development of Chinese domestic air travel. And here we're looking at the situation since the beginning of this year. We're looking at tickets being issued. Now, very clearly, end of January, we see a drop in the number of tickets being issued. That's when the first travel restrictions are being put in place. This is where the crisis, the COVID crisis, starts getting bigger and bigger. We hit rock bottom at the end of February, and then there is a slow rebound taking place. It has a lot to do with the Chinese economy getting back on track. So we've got some form of recovery, but we can still see that this rebound is limited in time. And from the end of February, we still can notice growth, but this growth is very, very gradual. This has to do with the fact that a lot of people that had been trapped during the Chinese New Year were able to go back to their normal place of residence, their usual place of residence, and that there is a basic level of economic activity taking place, but it's nothing like the recovery the whole tourism sector is hoping for. It's mainly commercial centers benefiting from this growth in domestic air travel instead of typical leisure destinations. So This recovery since then is still happening. We see, you can see at the end of April, beginning of May, another bump, let's say, in the recovery. That's the Labor Day weekend, which coincided with the lifting of some internal travel restrictions. So we can see that there is demand, but this demand is still very fragile. And this recovery, when you start looking at it in details, is mainly affecting specific groups of people. It's mainly the young being more likely to travel. We can see a lot of students flying back to their university. So it's gradual coming back to normal, I would say, rather than a jump in domestic tourism. And this is something to take into account, because when you look at those figures regarding air traffic, you start to realize that the people you see on the pictures on the Forbidden City or the Great Wall of China are mainly pictures of locals. It's local tourism taking place. A lot of people going to their destination by high-speed train or by car rather than by plane. So yes, this is encouraging, but it will take a while before we get back to normal. And the insights that many, or the conclusion that many brands have taken based on this data, is that at the moment, if you want to do business with Chinese people, you have to do business with them in China, because we can see no sign of recovery on the Chinese outbound market at the moment. Now, moving on to a different part of the world, Latin America. I think it's an interesting example to look at as well, because while China is, while China and a number of other destinations are slowly getting a grip on the epidemics, it is still raging in South America. And it's interesting to look at the way people book or do not book South America, because it tells us what the expectations are regarding the evolution of the pandemic. So here we've selected one of the key markets for the destination, which is the United Kingdom, and we looked at bookings that were made in the last week of May. So that was last week. Obviously, there were still more cancellations than bookings. So the overall picture is very well. No, sorry, there were very slightly more bookings than cancellations. We see that bookings are 96%, about 96% behind. So the overall picture is quite negative, but there were still some new bookings being made. So it was interesting to look at the departure date for these bookings. And as you can see on this chart, bookings for the coming month are flat. It's only in Q1 of 2021 that we start seeing some bookings. So at the moment, UK people from the UK considering a trip to Latin America do not envision this trip before Easter next year. And even then, we can see that the number of bookings for Easter that was performed last week is way lower than during the same period just a year ago. So no clear recovery scenario for this destination at the moment. Now, if we look at the Caribbean, where a growing number of destinations are communicating on reopening, we see some signs of hope as well. Here we've decided to focus on searches that travelers from the Netherlands are performing on Skyscanner for a future trip, and we're trying to see where they think that trip could take place. And here we've got a pretty clear picture of the situation. As you can see, a strong increase proportionally of bookings, of searches for a trip with a departure in December. So when it comes to the Caribbean, the Caribbean holiday, people from the Netherlands are more considering a Christmas holiday in the Caribbean than a summer holiday. And this is also something we can see in booking patterns. This is the regular booking patterns for trips from the Netherlands to the Caribbean. We're looking at when exactly trips to take place in October, November, and December are booked. There's a lot of last-minute bookings, and these bookings are yet to come. But interestingly enough, the bookings that are still that were made in the past month are still there, meaning that people have a wait-and-see attitude. They're still booking, even though at a very slow pace, but they are not canceling, and that's the most interesting part of it, because in many other destinations, if you look at bookings for the summer, for example, you'd see that the general pattern was to massively cancel those trips. People are still hoping that they will be able to travel this winter, and well, I guess we'll hope they are right. Now, final part of the world, or the last part of the world I would like to look at in this presentation is Europe, where a number of key destinations have communicated on a reopening. And what we can see at this stage is that communication on reopenings is, in a way, reigniting bookings, and that's very interesting. If we look at Spain, for example, and look at the tickets being issued for international flights to Spain for a trip this summer, June, July, and August, we can see a very, very depressing trend from beginning of March, where bookings, the number of tickets being issued completely dropped, and then it was flat, close to 0% until the very end of May. On the 23rd of May, the Spanish government announced that Spain would be soon open to foreign tourists starting on July 1st. And you can see an immediate impact of this announcement on booking patterns. You can start to see the bookings bouncing back. And it's not only Spain, it's pretty much every destination we have looked at in the past few days. This is Greece. Very similar pattern, even more pronounced. The Greek government announced on the 20th of May that Greece would be open to foreign tourists again, and immediately we see the number of bookings bouncing back. So this is encouraging, but remember that picture of that chart of booking situation for the summer. I very, very seriously doubt that with the current state of bookings, the industry will manage to catch up for the summer. This will be a horrible summer for the industry. And that leads me to the last of the 5 facts I wanted to mention, and it is that reopening is not the same as recovery. Yes, we're seeing some booking activity taking place. So again, we're seeing that the sector is progressively getting out of coma, but it's definitely not ready to run a marathon. For true recovery to take place, I believe that the lifting of travel restriction is paramount. We need this to happen if we want true recovery to take place. And then I believe we need 2 key things on the supply side. It's air capacity. We need those planes to fly again. We need a decent load factor so that airlines can do business and bring people to destinations of their choice. And we need those destinations to be open for business. It's absolutely key. So we need hotels to be open, we need tourist attractions to be open, we need restaurants to be open, etc., etc. That's a crucial component of any recovery scenario. And on the demand side, we need consumer confidence to come back. It's been shattered in the past few months, with I think of airlines canceling flights by the thousands, and not giving proper refund to customers. Airlines offering flights to destinations that are still not open for business. So I think this has very seriously, very negatively impacted on consumer confidence, and this needs to be built up again if we want people to feel confident enough to travel. And they also need, of course, to feel safe while traveling. And the last element on the demand side is the cash. We need travelers to have enough disposable income to travel, and with the terrible recession that is looming, I believe this is going to be a very serious issue in the coming month or year. And don't forget either that the travel sector is also competing with other economic sectors. When you are a Spanish person that has spent a number of months in complete lockdown, what is it that you will want to do with your money? Will you go for a trip? Or will you decide to invest this money in making your stay at home more comfortable? That's a question many people will ask themselves. We tend to think that destinations are competing against each other, and that's true. But travel is competing against other forms of activity, and we should keep that in mind. So to conclude, I believe maybe the one big opportunity that this crisis is offering us is the opportunity to be truly data-driven. Many tourism businesses have been lagging behind on this matter. They know that it's important to be smart, but they've never made the necessary investments to make it happen. Now they will have to do it if they want to survive. You will have to be smart in the way you use your very limited resources, financial resources, and this is something that this crisis is helping you do. That is, identify the information that is truly relevant for you, so that you can derive insights that will help you do business better. So when demand picks up, and I hope it will be soon, but I'm not widely optimistic about it, as you have understood, you will be ready to grow your business in a sustainable way. So I thank you for your attention, and I believe it is now time for question and answers. Jed, back to you.
So there you have it. Thanks again for your company this week, and if you haven't already done so, please do have a listen to the Q&A from this session, which is in the next episode, also out now. We're officially launching lowseasontraveller.com next week on the 18th of June, and so there'll be a lot of activity which you can get involved in, as well as some brilliant competitions too. Please do sign up to receive our updates on lowseasontraveller.com, and also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and you may just be able to win an incredible low season prize. That's all for now. Enjoy your day, stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, and please don't forget to share our content with your friends and industry colleagues who may also believe that now, more than ever, travel is better without the crowds.